At my own wedding rehearsal, in front of God, the priest, and every single person who mattered to me, my future mother-in-law looked me dead in the eye and with this smug little grin said, "She's just a baby mama in a dress." Her friends actually laughed. But before I could say a word, my 10-year-old son walked to the front of the church and said something that made the entire room go silent. Yeah, that really happened. Let me take you back to that moment. It was the night before the happiest day of my life, or at least, it was supposed to be. We were at the Holy Trinity Chapel, a small, whitewashed church that Jordan's family had been attending for 3 generations. I remember standing under those stained glass windows, watching the golden light hit the pews like it was out of a movie. My heels were too high, and my palms were sweaty, but I was trying my best to hold it together. I was marrying the man I loved. This was supposed to be beautiful, and it was, until she opened her mouth. Darlene Mason, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. Blonde, pearls always, voice like honey-coated vinegar. You know the type. She never really liked me from the start, but she hit it just well enough around Jordan. She'd call me sweetie, with a tone that felt more like, "You don't belong here." But I kept telling myself, she'll come around. We're building a family. She has to see that. I was wrong. Now, before I get too deep into what happened, let me introduce you to the people who were there. Because trust me, this story isn't just about one cruel comment. It's about who we are and how one moment can shift everything. First, there's me, Amira Blake, 32. I had Eli when I was just 21. No wedding, no partner, no white dress. Just me, a scared young mom with a baby on my hip and a world that looked at me like I was already a failure. But I didn't give up. I built my life from the ground up. I started a small Etsy store that turned into a full-blown e-commerce brand, paid my bills, paid for my son's school, paid for everything. By the time I met Jordan, I wasn't looking for a fairy tale. I was just hoping for someone who saw me as more than a statistic. And Jordan Mason, he saw me. Really saw me. He never treated me like a charity case or some inspiration. He respected my grind, my independence, and he loved Eli like his own. We'd been together for almost 3 years when he proposed. His exact words were, "You, me, and Eli. That's the only family I want." Which brings me to Eli, my 10-year-old son. Smart, quiet, observant in ways that kids shouldn't have to be. He's had to grow up with a front row seat to how society talks about baby mamas. He's seen me work until 2 a.m. packing orders just to keep us afloat, and even though I tried to shield him from the judgment, he always knew. Then there's Talia, my best friend since college. She's the one who sat with me during the darkest moments, who cheered me on when I didn't think I had anything left. She was my maid of honor and my emotional armor that day. Without her, I probably would have walked out of that chapel and never looked back. And of course, Darlene, Jordan's mother, the woman who smiled through clenched teeth whenever I was around. She never said anything too direct before the rehearsal, just passive-aggressive questions like, "Will Eli be sitting with the children or the adults?" Or, "Did your dress come off the rack or did someone sew it for you?" Things that made you question whether she was being rude or just old-fashioned. But that night at the rehearsal, she dropped the mask. So there we were. I'm standing by the altar, Jordan talking with the priest, Father Jacob, a sweet older man with a kind face, and Darlene walks over with her friends. All hairspray and wine teeth, and she says it, loud enough for everyone near the front to hear. "She's just a baby mama in a dress." And they laughed. Before I could even turn around, before I could feel the heat rising in my chest or find words that wouldn't shake, Eli stepped forward. 10 years old, black dress shoes, little navy suit he picked himself, and with more courage than most grown men, he walked to the front pew and said, "Do you want to see who paid for this wedding?" That was the moment the entire room froze. You ever walk into a room that's supposed to feel like a celebration and feel like you don't belong? That's exactly what it felt like when I walked into that chapel for my wedding rehearsal. The sunlight through the stained glass windows was breathtaking. It painted the pews in amber and ruby tones, like something out of a dream. And for a second, just a second, I let myself believe I was walking into a fairy tale moment. I was wearing a soft blush dress, nothing fancy, just something elegant that I bought with my own money. Eli was gripping my hand, wearing the little navy blazer we picked out together at a secondhand boutique. He insisted on wearing it for the rehearsal because he said, "If this is your big day, Mom, it's my big day too." God, I love that kid. I took a deep breath as we stepped inside. Jordan was already near the altar, smiling, waving us in. The priest, Father Jacob, nodded kindly. Talia gave me a thumbs up from one of the pews. Everything was supposed to be perfect, but I felt it. The tension. There's something about a fake smile that cuts sharper than a scowl. And Darlene, Jordan's mom, she was giving me that smile from across the room. You know the one. The one that says, "I'm being polite because there are witnesses." Let me give you a little background on me, because I wasn't supposed to be here according to a lot of people. I'm Amira Blake, 32, black woman, single mom, business owner, and none of that came easy. I had Eli when I was 21. I was a sophomore in college. The father? Long gone before I even knew I was pregnant. I dropped out, moved back home, and started working retail while taking online classes. People pitied me, or worse, judged me. I remember pushing Eli in a stroller through a grocery store while women whispered, "So young," like I couldn't hear them. But I didn't quit. I worked every shift I could, started selling handmade candles online, first to friends, then to strangers. I turned a $200 side hustle into a six-figure online brand by the time Eli was 5. And every step of the way, it was just me and him. We didn't have a village. We built our own world. So when I met Jordan, I was guarded. He was everything I didn't expect. Patient, grounded, the kind of man who asked questions and actually listened to the answers. We met at a pop-up market. He bought one of my candles and asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I almost said no, but Eli liked him. He said, "Mom, he's got gentle eyes." We dated slow. I made it clear from the beginning. Eli wasn't a bonus, he was the package. Jordan never flinched. He'd take Eli to baseball games, help him with math homework, even taught him how to make scrambled eggs. He was the first man Eli ever called Dad, even before we were engaged. So when he proposed, I didn't cry because I was surprised. I cried because it finally felt like someone saw all of me and didn't try to fix me. But Darlene never saw me that way. From day one, she treated me like Jordan was lowering his standards. I was the girl with baggage. She never said it outright, but I could feel it. The polite conversations that ended in awkward silence. The way she introduced me as Eli's mother, not Jordan's fiancée. The way she would ask Eli, "Do you miss your real dad?" in front of me like I was a footnote. Jordan and I talked about it. He swore she'd come around, and I wanted to believe him. I wanted so badly to believe that love could conquer her judgment. So I tried. I smiled. I thanked her when she sent a fruit basket. I invited her to fittings and tastings. She barely participated, but I gave her grace. Because I wanted a peaceful wedding. I didn't want Eli to see me go to war with the woman who was supposed to become his grandmother. But as I stood there in that chapel, watching her whisper to her friends, watching the side eyes and quiet snickers, something in my stomach twisted. Talia leaned in and whispered, "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just nerves." But I knew it wasn't just nerves. It was the realization that I was about to marry into a family that didn't fully accept me, and I was trying to pretend it didn't matter. Spoiler alert, it did matter. It always did. I didn't know then that the next words out of Darlene's mouth would feel like a slap in the face, that she'd finally say out loud what she'd been thinking all along. And I definitely didn't know that Eli, my sweet, quiet son, was about to become the unexpected hero of the day. They say people show you who they really are when they think they're safe, when they think no one important is watching. For Darlene, that moment came just before the final walkthrough of the rehearsal. The guests had found their seats, the priest was going over the processional one more time, and I was standing near the altar, quietly going over my vows in my head. Eli had gone to get a snack with Talia, Jordan was talking to the organist, and I was alone. Darlene saw her opening. She approached with 2 of her friends, Susan and Marlene, I think. Women dressed in expensive neutrals clutching handbags like armor. The kind of women who talk in whispers and look down their noses without ever breaking a smile. I heard the click of their heels before I even turned. Darlene stepped up beside me and looked me over. Not a word of greeting, just eyes moving from my shoes to my shoulders as if I were a statue she was deciding whether or not to buy. Then she turned to her friends, smiled, and said, "She's just a baby mama in a dress." And they laughed. Not politely, not nervously. They laughed like it was a joke at a comedy club, like they'd been waiting to say that out loud for years. And in that moment, everything inside me went still. I wasn't even angry yet. I was humiliated. I felt hot and cold at the same time. My skin crawled. The way she said it so casually, like I wasn't even standing there, like I was just a minor inconvenience in her son's life that she had to tolerate for one more day. I looked at her, right in her eyes, and she didn't even flinch. She just gave me that smug, rehearsed smile and said, "Oh, relax, Amira. We're just having a little fun." Fun. That's what it was to her, mocking my entire existence. I wanted to speak. I wanted to say something that would stop her in her tracks, something cutting, but I couldn't find my voice. My throat felt tight, like my words were stuck behind years of swallowing my pride. And then I felt a presence behind me. I turned slightly, and there was Talia, holding a juice box and wearing a look that could have burned holes through Darlene's soul. Talia snapped, "Say it again, I dare you." Darlene rolled her eyes and waved her off like a fly. I looked around the room. Some people had clearly heard. Priest was frowning from the altar. Jordan hadn't heard. He was still talking to the music coordinator, oblivious. That hurt too, because this wasn't the first time she'd said something veiled or judgmental, but it was the first time she said it out loud, bold and sharp, right to my face, with an audience. And Jordan still wasn't there. I felt so small. I felt like everything I'd overcome, every late night, every customer order I packed by hand, every school meeting I walked into alone, every birthday cake I baked when I barely had money for groceries, all of it had been erased in one cruel sentence. Just a baby mama in a dress. I thought about leaving. I really did. For a few seconds, I imagined walking out of that chapel, grabbing Eli, and never looking back. But I didn't move, because then I saw Eli. He had returned from his snack run, holding a little napkin with crackers, and he was just staring. He had heard it. His eyes were locked on Darlene, and there was something fierce behind them I hadn't seen before. He didn't say a word. Not yet. But I saw his jaw tighten. I saw the way he clenched that napkin until the crackers crumbled in his hand. He didn't cry. He didn't look at me for reassurance. He just watched. And something shifted in me, because suddenly this wasn't just about my pride. It was about what my son had witnessed, what he'd internalize if I stayed silent, if I let her define who I was. I walked over to Jordan, pulled him aside, and told him what happened. He froze. His face went pale. She said, "What?" She said it, loud, with her friends. He glanced toward his mother, then back at me. "I'll talk to her." I nodded. "Please do." But I wasn't banking on Jordan anymore. Not in that moment. Because I knew what was coming wasn't about him. It wasn't about Darlene. It was about Eli, and how sometimes the smallest voice in the room can carry the most weight. I always thought that if I ever got humiliated in public, truly humiliated, I'd storm out. I'd make a scene. I'd defend myself with fire. But when Darlene said what she said and her friends laughed, I didn't do any of that. I froze. And later, I hated myself for that. Not because I didn't yell back, but because I let it happen without standing up for myself. I let that moment sit there in the air, poisoning everything I'd worked so hard to create. My dignity, my peace, my family. But what I didn't know then was that I wasn't the only one listening. Eli had heard it all, and that changed everything. After I told Jordan what his mother said, he looked completely stunned. For a second, I think he didn't even know how to respond. He just kept saying, "She actually said that? She said that to you?" "Yes," I told him. "To me, in front of people. Loud enough for your priest to hear it." He rubbed his forehead like he was trying to rub the words out of existence. "I'll talk to her. Right now." But I stopped him. "No," I said. "Not now. Not here. Let's just finish the rehearsal." Because honestly, I didn't trust him to handle it the way it needed to be handled. Jordan was good, but he avoided conflict like it was the plague, especially when it came to his mother. And right then, I needed strength. not politeness. I went back to my seat, head held high, even though my heart was a mess. Talia leaned in. Want me to drag her across the parking lot? Because I'll do it in heels. I smiled weakly. Number. But thank you. I tried to collect myself as the priest continued with the seating arrangements and timing. I watched Jordan take a deep breath before rejoining his mother. He didn't say much, just looked at her, jaw tight. Whatever passed between them was silent and tense. Meanwhile, Eli had wandered off again, this time to the back of the chapel. I assumed he was upset, maybe embarrassed. I considered following him, but something told me to let him be. I could see him from where I sat. He wasn't crying. He wasn't angry. He was focused. I saw him pull something out of his backpack, a folded piece of paper. He smoothed it across one of the pews and looked down at it like he was studying a game plan. Then he tucked it into his jacket pocket, straightened his tiny suit, and walked back toward the front of the church. I wasn't prepared for what he did next. The priest had just finished running through the final order of the ceremony. Everyone was starting to relax. People were chatting, finding their coats. That's when Eli quietly walked to the very front, stepped up on the little riser where the readers would stand during the ceremony, and turned around to face the entire room. I didn't even realize what was happening until I heard him clear his throat. Everyone turned. Some people smiled, thinking maybe it was a sweet gesture. Maybe he wanted to say how excited he was for the wedding. But his face was serious. His little hands clenched into fists at his sides. His chest rose and fell once. Then he spoke. Can I say something real quick? The priest blinked. Of course, son. Eli scanned the crowd. Then his eyes locked directly on Darlene. And in a voice louder and clearer than I'd ever heard from him, he said, Do you want to see who paid for this wedding? Dead silence. My stomach dropped. I felt every eye in that room shift between me, Eli, and Darlene. Even Jordan turned toward him with confusion. Eli reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded paper. He held it up. This is a list of everything my mom paid for, the food, the decorations, her dress, my suit, the photographer, the music, all of it. He looked at Darlene again. She paid for it with her business, with her money. She planned everything. She did all of this. And you still laughed at her? No one breathed. He looked back at the priest. You're the one marrying my mom and Jordan, right? Yes, Father Jacob said slowly. Well, Eli said, just so you know, my mom isn't just some baby mama. She's the reason this wedding is even happening. That's when I felt the shift, not just in the room, but in me. All this time, I had been trying to keep the peace, trying to avoid rocking the boat. But my 10-year-old son didn't flinch. He didn't overthink. He saw disrespect and decided not to let it slide. And that was the moment I realized something. I wasn't the weak one for freezing earlier. I was just holding my breath, waiting for someone to remind me who I really was, and that someone was my son. There are moments in life when time just pauses. Not because anything physically stops, but because everyone in the room collectively feels something, a shift, a reckoning. That moment when everything that's been building finally cracks open. That's what it felt like when Eli stood at the front of that chapel, holding that folded list in his tiny, determined hand, and said, Do you want to see who paid for this wedding? The air changed. I heard it. I felt it. You know when people stop moving, stop fidgeting with their phones, stop whispering to each other? That kind of silence. Father Jacob, the priest, blinked in surprise. He stepped forward slowly, as if unsure whether to intervene or listen. Eli looked directly at him and said, Can you read it? He handed the list over without hesitation. My breath caught in my throat. I had no idea what was even written on that paper. I never told Eli to make a list. I didn't know he even knew the details, but of course he did. He'd sat beside me on late nights when I was on Zoom with vendors. He'd watched me do inventory at 1 a.m., pack candle orders, take calls from caterers and florists. He was there for all of it, because he lived it with me. Father Jacob glanced down at the list and cleared his throat. This appears to be a complete itemization of your wedding budget, he said, almost smiling in disbelief. Everything, from the flowers to the music licensing to the transportation. He looked at me. All paid for by you, Amira? I nodded slowly. Darlene didn't speak. Her friends were suddenly very interested in the tops of their shoes. Eli's voice came again, steady, unwavering. She didn't ask anybody for help, not even Dad. She paid for it because she wanted it to be beautiful, because she deserved it. He turned to Darlene now. And you laughed at her, right in front of me. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. That's what made it even more powerful. He just said it like a truth that couldn't be denied. And then he added softly but firmly, "You don't get to talk about my mom like that." Darlene opened her mouth, then closed it. You could almost see the weight of the moment sinking in on her. The priest looked like he was trying not to stare too hard, but even he was affected. And then, without waiting for permission, Eli walked back to his seat, next to me, and sat down. He didn't say anything else, just leaned into my side, calm as could be. Jordan came over and knelt in front of both of us. He reached for Eli's hand and looked him in the eye. "I am so proud of you. You didn't just speak up for your mom, you spoke up for what's right." Eli looked at him and asked, "Did you know she was going to say that about her?" Jordan shook his head immediately. "Number, I didn't, and I'm sorry I wasn't there when it happened." Then he turned to me, his voice trembling just slightly. "I should have protected you better, but from now on, I will. Always." He stood up and turned toward the crowd, toward his mother. And then Jordan did something I'll never forget. He walked up to Darlene, right there in front of everyone, and said, "You owe Amira an apology, and if you can't do that, you won't be sitting in the front row tomorrow." Gasps rippled through the room. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, probably to say something biting or dramatic, but she saw the look in her son's eyes, and she stopped herself. "I didn't mean it like that," she said quietly. Jordan didn't budge. "Then say what you do mean. Say it to her face." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with a forced tightness in her throat, Darlene turned to me and muttered, "I'm sorry." It wasn't sincere, but I didn't care, because for the first time, she had to feel small, and not because I got revenge, not because I made a speech or flipped a table, but because a 10-year-old boy, my son, spoke with more truth and clarity than any adult in that room, and everyone listened. After that, the rehearsal wrapped up awkwardly. Guests avoided eye contact with Darlene. A few came up to me quietly. One woman hugged me. Another said, "You raised a good one." But I already knew that. Eli wasn't just defending me. He was defending the truth, that I wasn't a mistake. I wasn't just some baby mama. I was a whole woman who built a life, a family, a future. And I had done it without waiting for permission. And now? Now the whole damn room knew it too. The chapel was mostly empty now. People had filed out, some offering stiff goodbyes, others just awkward glances. The stained glass that once painted the pews with color now cast long shadows as the sun dipped behind the trees. Eli sat beside me in the front row, swinging his legs just slightly. His suit jacket was a little wrinkled from all the movement, but he didn't seem to care. He looked calm, peaceful, like a storm had passed inside him, and now everything was still. "You okay?" I asked. He shrugged. "Yeah, I just didn't like her saying that about you." There it was, simple, honest, no drama. Just a child's understanding of what respect should look like. No parent wants their child to have to defend them, but God. I'd never felt more seen, more loved than in that moment. I squeezed his hand. "Thank you, baby. You didn't have to do that, but I'm so proud you did." He nodded, and then, because he's still 10 and wonderfully human, he whispered, "Do we still get cake tomorrow?" I laughed. Absolutely. The tension had finally broken. That night, after everyone had gone home and we were back at the Airbnb, I sat on the back porch with Jordan while Eli watched a movie inside. Jordan hadn't said much since the rehearsal ended. I knew he was processing everything. So was I. He poured us each a glass of wine, his silent peace offering, and sat next to me. "I'm sorry," he said finally. I looked at him. "For what?" "For letting it get this far. For not stepping in sooner. I guess I kept hoping my mom would come around if we just gave her time, but she made her choice." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, and Eli made his." Jordan looked down at his glass. "That boy, he's something else." "He's your son now, too," I said. "You saw the way he handled that room. He didn't flinch." Jordan shook his head, amazed. "He did more in 5 minutes than most grown men would have done in a lifetime." We sat in silence for a while after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes after surviving something together, shared quiet, a deeper understanding. The next day, the wedding day, was beautiful. No drama, no incidents. Darlene showed up dressed in navy, lips pressed in a tight line, not quite scowling, but not exactly joyful either. She sat in the second row, not the front, her choice apparently. And honestly, that was fine by me. She didn't speak much, but she didn't say anything cruel either. Sometimes silence is the best apology a person like that can offer. Eli walked me down the aisle. People gasped, not because it was unusual, but because it was perfect. He held my arm like a little gentleman. Jordan was already crying by the time we reached him. We said our vows. We danced. We ate too much cake. And the whole time, I wasn't thinking about Darlene. I wasn't thinking about the insult or the laughter or the years of subtle judgment. I was thinking about how far I'd come, about how hard I'd fought, about the fact that the little boy I raised, on my own, through sacrifice and sweat, had grown into a protector, a young man with a spine, a voice, and a heart. People kept coming up to me throughout the night. "That son of yours, he's got courage. You must be so proud." I just smiled and nodded, because yes, I was. But more than that, I was validated, not by their approval, not even by Darlene's discomfort, but by the truth that had unfolded in that chapel, that I had never been just a baby mama. I was a builder, a protector, a mother, a partner, a woman who gave her all and expected nothing in return except a little respect. And when that respect was denied, my child stepped up. So here's what I learned from that rehearsal, and what I hope you take away from this too. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never assume your worth needs to be proven to people who've already decided not to see it. And never, ever think that love means staying silent in the face of disrespect, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is raise your head high, say nothing, and let your child speak the truth for you. So yeah, that was my wedding rehearsal. Not the picture-perfect story people expect, but it's real. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. Because that day, I realized something deeper than dresses or decorations. I realized I'd raised a son who doesn't wait for permission to stand up for what's right. And in a world that loves to judge single moms, that moment, that was our win. If this story moved you, if you've ever been underestimated, talked down to, or made to feel like you weren't enough, I hope you know now you don't need anyone's approval to prove your worth. Thank you for listening. If this story meant something to you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one. Because here, we tell the real stories, the kind that stick with you. I'll see you in the next one.